So, Brandon, let's start off with just your memory of the first hire you made in Ukraine. How did that happen?
Um, it was actually working one of my other projects. It runs my family, and we were working on some code called Loopback. And my development team at the time was in Pakistan, and they were struggling with some aspect of the code, and so they were looking for some help on it. And I said, go to like an online forum and uh, find somebody that's really good at doing loopback and this tech to help consult. And so they were like, well, there's this guy that he's American. His name's Heath, and he's been providing a lot of help and for free essentially, just volunteering on this forum, providing information. Um, and so I said, great, let's bring him on as a consultant and he can help you guys. And so that's how we got introduced to Heath. Heath is an American. He lives in Ukraine, very talented developer. And I said, I'd like to meet Heath. And so we chatted and we got to know each other. And, you know, um, we kind of resonated as we started talking. And as he got into the project and learned what we were doing and how we were using our building technology for healthcare and health and helping patients identify diseases in their family. He got really interested and said, I'm kind of like at the end of another gig that I've been working on and looking for my next opportunity. Would you be interested in hiring a chief technology officer to lead this tech stuff? And I'm like, yes, I would love to have somebody like you of your caliber to come and lead our tech. And so that was 2015 when I got introduced to Heath, and he worked on that project. And from there, we built another tech product. And this whole time, Doxyme has been going on, and Doxyme finally got to the point where we needed to hire a chief technology officer to really lead it. And so we kind of brought all the products together and hired Heath full time as a partner and chief technology officer of Doxyme in 2019, just before COVID hit. And so Heath was our first hire in Ukraine. He was American in Ukraine, but he also introduced us to other Ukrainians. And so when at Doxyme, when we needed a developer a few years ago, he introduced us to one of his colleagues he worked closely with, and his name's Victor, and Victor came and worked for us. And from that, we always said, hey, the Ukrainian talent pool is good. They're available. They speak English well, and are about the third of the cost of developers in the U.S. And so, for a startup that had limited resources, it was a way for us to get a lot of bang for our buck. And so, that's how we got into the Ukrainian market, and we've been happy with it over the years, and we've never had any serious issues like this until now.
Hmm. So the 48 that now work for Doxyme, did he find most of those people?
Maybe not him directly, but he has a director of development who goes and does the hires and recruits and stuff like that. But yes, he it's through his channels and his hires that have gone and subsequently hired everybody else. We have direct hires, but we also have two other. They're essentially like tech staffing agencies where they go and source the people and we pay them to pay the employees and they manage it. So we consider them all part of the Doxyme team, even though some of them get paid directly by us, some get paid through a third party. But from our perspective, they're all the same and equal.
So in the process of working with Heath and the other Doxyme employees and your visits there, what have you learned about Ukraine?
Yeah, Ukraine is interesting. I visited 3 times now, and one of the interesting things that I saw about Ukraine were these three very contrasting styles, all merged together, all right next to each other. So you have this old European style that you see maybe in
Mm.
like a Krakow, Poland, or in Austria, just the old style Europe, very traditional looking. And then you have these very like mid-century Soviet style, like gray,
Mm.
plain buildings, pretty ugly looking, and that Soviet kind of impression style. And then you have these very modern, like very modern Western buildings, and they're all right next to each other. So you'll see a modern glass
Mm.
skyscraper next to an old Soviet building, next to this old European architecture, right next to each other in Kiev. And it's very interesting to see all those different styles all together. And the people there are they're very happy and funny. Like they've got a very positive attitude, and they are very a lot of the young people who I'm around because they are developers. Many of them grew up in the '90s, and all they've known is freedom and democracy. They never
Mhm.
grew up during that Soviet era, and they very much see themselves as European, and they look towards the West, the Western Europeans, United States, as the example of what they want to be like. And so,
Mhm.
English is very speaking English is very important because they that's how you do business, and that's how you engage in the modern economy. And they very much look towards the West for what they want to be like and who they want to be and become. The Russian, the Soviet, that influence is definitely not something that they aspire to or want to be like, but it's very much present in their society. Many of them speak Russian because it's a very common language there and similar to Ukrainian. And so while many of them do speak Russian, they don't necessarily want to be Russian. It's just a common language that's there.
So I'm just curious, prior to the mounting tension about a possible invasion, did you get many vibes from Heath and the other employees about being nervous or anxious about the political situation?
No, it's in fact the opposite. We had to push them to be nervous about it. Back in 2014, there was a revolution in Ukraine where they ousted the government that was corrupt and was essentially a puppet of Russia. They ousted that government. They brought in a new leader, president, and the government at that time was weak, and Russia had actually invaded then, and they took Crimea and other parts of Ukraine. There's not much that
Right.
Ukraine could do about it then because the government was weak. And it's always a looming threat that Russia's on the border and they could always take more. And it's always kind of been like that. And so it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. It's like, oh, that's just Russia. They're just typical Russia. And yeah, they don't like that they took Crimea, but they can't really do anything about it because Russia's Russia. And um, so it's been kind of this stalemate. And so, and it was always kind of like, and it was always like in the back of their minds, Russia's always there, but it's never really a serious like thing that they actually had to worry about to this extent. Um, when we started to see troops building up on the border, started about a year ago, we're on the American side. Um, we understand our perspective of the world is different than others, and we definitely look at Putin and say, what's going on here, right? And so we're seeing the troops build up, and we start asking questions. And again, the people on the ground there are very much like, yeah, this is just Putin, nothing to worry about. This is normal, right? So they kept reassuring us that this was nothing to worry about. In about November, it was still happening, and it's more than has ever happened before. And we brought up the issue again and said, what is going on here? Do we have to worry about this? Should we have a plan? We have 50 employees. What happens if Russia does invade? Do we have a plan? No, we don't have a plan, but yeah, we don't. You don't have to worry about it. And it was about December that we all met as a team, and we again pressed Heath on this and said we don't have a plan in case something happens. We should at least have a plan. And so he agreed at that time. I would say reluctantly to say, all right, you know, you guys are not going to let this go. I promise that I'll sit down with the team and we'll come up with a plan in case there's a Russian invasion. Really, it was really I think, to appease us, and and he did it. So over the next month, he and some of the leaders on the tech team there in Ukraine put together a plan, and they assessed the situation. Again, the military was still building up on the borders, and they were still assessing everything. And through this analysis, they're like, yeah, I mean, the reality of something happening is more so than it's ever been up to this point. And this is something that is more likely to happen now than any time before, but they still didn't expect it to happen. What was interesting about this emergency response plan is that they detailed the Russian forces and how they would invade. And they detailed what the problems would be, what would be happening, refugees, where they would go. They had all this in detailed. And what's amazing about this analysis is that they were spot on. If you look at this report that was done in January by our team, they showed where the Russian forces would be invading, and it's right exactly what you see in the news, with how they invaded and the subsequent result of refugees fleeing to the west, the western part of the country being safe, going in European. There's how they'll respond, the shortages that will happen, the currency, all that stuff. That analysis was pretty spot on, and that was in January. So we had this emergency response plan set in January. Part of this was that is part of the plan is that we should set up an apartment, a hub in Lviv on the western part of the country as a stopping point or as a place for employees to evacuate to. We couldn't house all 50 employees, but to have an apartment with several bedrooms that they can stop at and stay for a few days while they find their next stop was what we thought was a smart move. And so we got that apartment a month before the invasion because trying to find an apartment now is almost impossible there. And so we had things set. We also had money essentially set aside or allocated for an invasion like this, and really the credit to the the team that put it together. Everything was really set up. So when we had to activate that plan, the money was there, the communication network was there, the apartment was there, and people were ready to go and make it happen. A couple weeks before, I mean, with the invasion really looming, we did evacuate a couple people beforehand, and so our director of DevOps is Canadian but lives in Ukraine, and he went with his family to Abu Dhabi to get out of there. Heath had evacuated a week before out of Kyiv to Lviv to stay there. And some other people went to the west to Lviv as well to stay there as it became imminent that this was about to happen. And so we got ahead of it and we were prepared. And from the sounds of it, there were a lot of people on the ground who still didn't believe it was going to happen until bombs started falling. And they, at that point, had to respond along with everybody else. And so they were in a lot more difficult of a situation. But our team was prepared because of this emergency response plan.
Wow. And what kind of communication have you been in since then, since February 24th?
So we have a team communication platform called Slack. So that's how we communicate as a team. And this is everybody on the team is able to communicate. So not just the people in Ukraine, but also the people in the U.S. and around the world. And so we've been very active in communicating from the American side to them through Slack, and they have their own channel. We have a channel called Ukraine Assistance where we can talk about how we can help the people in Ukraine. There's a Ukraine channel for just Ukrainian people, and these things were part of the emergency response plan and set up. So we communicate through that. There's also an app on the mobile phones called Telegram that they use in Ukraine. And there's a channel just for the Doxyme employees in Ukraine to send messages back and forth. I'm on that channel, but they're all communicating in Ukrainian, so I don't understand what they're saying. But sometimes I'll copy a message and then translate it in Google, and I'm able to see what they're saying. But so there is a lot of communication going on. Also, we are keeping up with every employee, so we have point people on the ground in Ukraine who are in contact with every employee every day to make sure they and their families are okay. And we had a status, a green, yellow, red status for where the employees were. So green zone is out of the country. Yellow zone is in Ukraine, but in a safe part of Ukraine. That's the yellow zone, I'm sorry. And then red zone is in a place where there's hostilities, where there is close to enemy territory where there's bombings, or they are have signed up for the armed services and are serving their country.
Right.
So they're in the red zone. And I don't know what the latest numbers are, but we were getting daily updates from the team there saying, all right, we have 25% of the team is in a green zone, 40 is in the yellow zone, and whatever else is in the red zone. And then there was a period of time where some of the employees, we lost contact with some of the employees, and that was nerve wracking for our point person who's trying to keep up with everybody to say, we don't know. We haven't been in contact. It's been a couple days. And so that was nervous. But fortunately, we have been in contact with everybody. And everybody is safe and accounted for. Everybody's accounted for. I can't say everybody's safe because there are still people in red zones, but everybody's accounted for. I at least speak to them on a daily basis, or at least get a message from them daily to know that they're okay.
Wow, Brandon. It sounds like your company in many ways has been uniquely positioned for this kind of crisis. So for a moment, I'd like to just have you unpack why you think it was so successful. The preparation and the current protection. It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah, I think it's a unique mix of we have Ukrainians on the team who understand how to make things happen on the ground. They understand the culture, the language, how to make things happen. Who are really good. We have a very talented team and very effective and very organized. And so I think that's a big piece because they're able to get things done effectively, and we trust them. And then you have the Americans, and we tend to be a little bit more skeptical about Putin and potential hostilities there. And so we were pushing for these things. We were seeing these things and saying, we should probably worry about this, right? And I think it was a combination of us being worried about it and pushing them on it, and they followed through. And so being prepared and having that foresight on one side, but also being organized and know the people on the ground and how to make things happen. Putting those two teams together to create the emergency plan was the key because without one or the other, it wouldn't have happened at the time or as effectively as it was.
So it's really a wonderful example of the strength of a bicultural
Yep.
effort
Yep.
across two countries, because having people from outside of a war zone helping the people who are
Right.
vulnerable really is a tremendous asset.
Right. And we are in America, we're safe and we're trying to do as much as we can to help them. And, it's in many ways, it feels like our hands are tied behind our back because it's like we can't really do anything. So, but we've sent money and resources and given them everything that they need to feel secure and safe from a financial perspective, and without actually, most of us, without actually going there and helping and doing things, we've tried to do as much as we can from a distance. And
Right.
but it is, I think, frustrating for some of us here in the U.S. to feel like we can't do more. We want to do more, and it's tough because we're so far away.